Evil doesn't pause for national grief. It was just 4 days after 9/11. America still flinched at every airplane overhead. Doors locked twice. Parents whispered prayers over sleeping children. September 15th, 2001, Sugar Land, Texas. While the nation mourned nearly 3,000 lives lost to terror, another tragedy quietly unfolded in a Walmart parking lot just outside Houston. A young nursing student never made it home. Her car sat running, her purse untouched, and she was gone. And for 24 hours, no one even realized she was missing. Officer Daniel Martinez spotted the white Honda Civic first. Engine off, driver's door slightly ajar, hazard lights blinking weakly against the fluorescent glow of the store's exterior. A lone shopping cart bumped against the rear bumper, pushed by the evening breeze with a metallic scraping that echoed across the empty asphalt. Keys dangled from the ignition. A brown leather purse sat untouched on the passenger seat, wallet visible through the open zipper. No signs of struggle. No broken glass. No blood. Just absence. Helen Donald should have been home hours ago. The 22-year-old nursing student had clocked out of her evening shift at Methodist Hospital at 9:47 p.m., just like she had every Tuesday for the past 8 months. Her supervisor, Nancy Rodriguez, remembered Helen stopping at the nurse's station to organize patient charts for the night shift. Always thoughtful. Always thorough. She was talking about her anatomy exam, Nancy would later tell police. Said she wanted to study tonight because she had church volunteer work tomorrow. Helen was 6 months away from graduating with her BSN from UT Health Science Center. Her professors knew her as the student who stayed late to help struggling classmates, who brought coffee to security guards during their midnight rounds, who had chosen trauma nursing because she wanted to help people during their worst moments. Her parents, Robert and Patricia Donald, raised her in the tree-lined neighborhoods of Kingwood. Robert, a petroleum engineer for ExxonMobil, worked the kind of steady job that built comfortable suburban lives. Patricia taught high school guidance counseling, helping teenagers navigate college applications and family problems. They had raised Helen to believe in safety, in community, in the goodness of people. Now, as police cordoned off the Walmart parking lot with yellow tape, that belief felt as fragile as everything else in post-9/11 America. Father Michael O'Sullivan arrived at 11:23 p.m. The priest from St. Lawrence Catholic Church moved through the crowd of officers with quiet authority, his black shirt and white collar immediately recognizable. He placed a gentle hand on Patricia Donald's trembling shoulder as she stared at her daughter's abandoned car. "We'll find her," he whispered, his voice steady and reassuring. God doesn't abandon his children. Ranked among America's safest cities year after year, it was the kind of place where neighbors borrowed sugar and children rode bikes until streetlights came on. Crime happened in other places, to other families. "We moved here because nothing bad happens in Sugar Land," Robert Donald said, staring out their kitchen window at the perfectly manicured lawns. That was the whole point. Now news vans lined their street. Reporters knocked on doors, asking neighbors if they felt safe anymore. The city that prided itself on being America's family-friendly haven suddenly questioned everything. Father O'Sullivan became their lifeline. He organized search parties that scoured every park, every creek, every abandoned building in Fort Bend County. He held prayer vigils at St. Lawrence that drew hundreds of volunteers. His calm presence anchored not just the Donald family, but an entire community struggling to understand how evil had found them. Father O'Sullivan never left our side. Patricia remembered. When I couldn't eat, he brought soup. When I couldn't sleep, he sat with us until dawn. He made us feel like Helen wasn't forgotten. David Chin barely spoke during his police interview. Helen's boyfriend of 2 years sat hunched forward, his medical resident scrubs wrinkled from 3 straight days of searching. His alibi was ironclad. He'd been performing emergency surgery at Texas Children's Hospital when Helen disappeared, surrounded by a surgical team of 12 people. She was going to change the world, David whispered. Helen saw pain and wanted to fix it. That's who she was. Detective Rodriguez found Helen's diary in her bedroom, tucked beneath nursing textbooks and study guides. Most entries chronicled her clinical rotations, her excitement about graduation, her plans for the future. But the final entry, dated September 12th, contained a single troubling line. I don't know what to do about what I saw at church. I can't stop thinking about it. Have you ever trusted someone completely, only to discover they weren't who you thought they were? Drop your thoughts below. Detective Marcus Rodriguez had seen enough missing persons cases to know the statistics. 24 hours was critical. 72 hours was when hope started to fade. After a week, you were usually looking for a body. Helen Donald had been gone for 5 days. Rodriguez carried the weight of 3 unsolved cases from his 15 years with Fort Bend County Sheriff's Office. Maria Santos disappeared 1998. Kevin Wright vanished 2000. Jennifer Kim missing since last spring. Their case files sat in his desk drawer like unfinished prayers, reminders of families who still called asking for updates he couldn't provide. He wouldn't let Helen become number 4. Tell me what doesn't fit, Rodriguez said to his new partner, Detective Sarah Williams, as they stood beside Helen's Honda Civic in the impound lot. Williams walked around the vehicle with fresh eyes. Just transferred from Harris County, she brought 15 years of experience and a reputation for noticing details others missed. She crouched beside the driver's door, studying the interior. No defensive wounds on the steering wheel. No torn fabric caught anywhere. Her purse is sitting perfectly upright. Williams pointed to the passenger seat. Whoever took her, she went willingly. At least initially. The evidence painted a picture of trust betrayed. Helen's keys remained in the ignition, her purse containing $127 in cash, credit cards, and her driver's license untouched. No signs of forced entry. No indication she'd been dragged from the vehicle. She knew her attacker, Rodriguez concluded. The tip line exploded with calls. Over 300 reports flooded in during the first week. A gas station attendant thought he saw Helen at a Shell station near Katy. A trucker claimed he spotted her at a rest stop outside Austin. A psychic from Louisiana insisted Helen was being held in an abandoned warehouse near the ship channel. Every lead demanded investigation. Every call represented hope for the Donald family and a community that had mobilized like never before. Volunteers organized search parties that covered thousands of acres. Local businesses printed flyers. Radio stations broadcast Helen's description every hour. Father O'Sullivan coordinated the volunteer efforts from Street Lawrence, turning the church fellowship hall into a command center. Maps covered the walls, marked with grid patterns showing areas already searched. Coffee urns stayed full around the clock as exhausted searchers came and went. The breakthrough came from the crime scene unit. Technician Amanda Foster found it on the passenger side door handle. A partial DNA profile that didn't belong to Helen, her family, or her boyfriend. The sample was small but complete enough for comparison testing. Rodriguez ran it through every database available. Cody's, local arrest records, sexual offender registries. Nothing matched. Somewhere out there, Helen's killer was walking free, his genetic signature preserved in evidence, but his identity a mystery. The killer left his calling card, but would it take 23 years to decode it? What do you think happened to Helen? Share your theories below. 6 months after Helen's disappearance, the searches had covered over 2,000 square miles across Fort Bend and Harris counties. Volunteer teams had combed through Brazos Bend State Park, explored every drainage ditch along Highway 6, and checked abandoned buildings from Sugar Land to downtown Houston. They found nothing. The Donald family's savings account dwindled as hope transformed into desperation. Robert Donald cashed in his retirement fund to hire Jennifer Morrison, a former FBI agent turned private investigator who specialized in cold cases. Morrison brought resources the sheriff's department couldn't afford. Ground-penetrating radar, cadaver dogs, and connections to federal databases. "We're not giving up on Helen," Patricia Donald announced at a press conference, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "Someone knows something. Someone saw something. Our daughter is out there." Morrison's investigation ran parallel to the official one, sometimes overlapping, sometimes creating tension. She interviewed Helen's classmates again, expanded the timeline, checked alibis that had already been verified. Her reports filled 3 binders, but yielded no new leads. Meanwhile, Father O'Sullivan's role in the community grew beyond spiritual comfort. He organized monthly memorial services that drew hundreds of attendees. He established a scholarship fund in Helen's name. He visited the Donald family every Tuesday evening, the same day of the week Helen had disappeared. Father O'Sullivan became our rock, Patricia would later recall. When the police couldn't give us answers, when the private investigator hit dead ends, he was there. He reminded us that God hadn't forgotten Helen. The priest's dedication impressed even hardened investigators. He attended every press conference, participated in search efforts despite his age, and opened the church doors to anyone needing comfort. The local newspaper ran a feature story calling him Sugarland's guardian angel. Detective Rodriguez felt the pressure mounting. Captain Williams wanted to reclassify Helen's case from active to cold. The department had new crimes demanding attention, limited resources, and a missing person with no body, no witnesses, and no viable suspects. Cases like this destroy careers, Captain Williams warned during their monthly review. Sometimes you have to accept that not every puzzle has a solution. Rodriguez kept Helen's file on his desk anyway. The call came on a rainy Thursday in March. Linda Patterson, a night shift worker at a convenience store near the medical center, had been struggling with her conscience for months. "I saw her that night," Patterson told Rodriguez over the phone. September 15th, around 10:30. She was walking with a man in dark clothing near the hospital parking garage. "I remembered because of what happened on September 11th. Everyone was paying attention to everything." Patterson's description was vague but consistent. Medium height, dark jacket, walking close to Helen like they knew each other. How many times did the killer comfort Helen's parents while hiding his secret? What do you think about Patterson's witness account? Let me know in the comments. Helen's story represents thousands of missing persons whose families never give up hope. If you believe every victim deserves justice, hit that subscribe button and help us shine light on forgotten cases. The confession started in year 2. Marcus Thompson, a drifter with a history of mental illness, walked into the Fort Bend County Sheriff's Office claiming he'd killed Helen Donald. He provided details that sounded convincing until investigators discovered he'd been incarcerated in Oklahoma during September 2001. Then came Robert Hayes, a construction worker desperate to avoid drug charges, who insisted he'd buried Helen's body near Galveston Bay. Search teams spent 3 days digging through marshland before Hayes admitted he'd fabricated the story, hoping for a plea deal. 7 false confessions in 5 years. Each one ripped open the Donald family's wounds, raising hope that crumbled under scrutiny. Patricia Donald's hair turned completely gray by 2004. Robert developed a tremor in his left hand that his doctor attributed to chronic stress. Every phone call could be the one, Patricia explained to a grief counselor. Every knock on the door might bring answers, but it's always another dead end, another person lying for attention or trying to escape their own problems. The 5th anniversary memorial service at St. Lawrence drew the largest crowd yet. Father O'Sullivan had aged gracefully, his silver hair and lined face lending him an almost prophetic appearance as he spoke from the pulpit. Helen Donald was a light in our darkness, he told the packed sanctuary. Her disappearance reminds us that evil exists in this world, but her memory reminds us that goodness persists. We continue to pray for answers, for closure, for peace. The service lasted 2 hours. Community members shared memories of Helen's volunteer work, her kindness, her dreams of healing others. Father O'Sullivan wept openly as he blessed the memorial plaque that would hang in the church foyer. Detective Rodriguez received his promotion to sergeant that same month. The department expected him to delegate the Helen Donald case to junior investigators, to focus on fresh crimes with better chances of resolution. Instead, he moved Helen's file to the larger desk in his new office. "Some cases choose you," he told his wife. "Helen chose me. I'm not walking away." After the memorial service, Father O'Sullivan lingered with the Donald family in the church parking lot. The September evening carried the same humid weight as the night Helen vanished. Patricia clutched a tissue, her eyes red from crying. "I want you to know," Father O'Sullivan said quietly, placing his hand on Patricia's shoulder, "I pray every night that Helen didn't suffer, that whoever took her showed mercy." His voice carried such genuine anguish that Patricia felt compelled to comfort him instead of the other way around. "Your prayers mean everything to us, Father," she whispered back. What does a killer think about when he's pretending to grieve with his victim's family? How would you handle knowing someone's darkest secret? Share your thoughts below. By 2011, Sugarland had learned to breathe again. New families moved into the subdivision where yellow ribbons once hung from every mailbox. Children rode bikes through neighborhoods where search parties had once gathered. The city's tourism board resumed promoting Sugar Land as America's safest community, though Helen Donald's missing person flyers still hung in post office lobbies and grocery store bulletin boards, sun-faded and curling at the edges. The Donald family existed in a different timeline. Robert retired early from ExxonMobil, unable to concentrate on engineering projects when his daughter's fate remained unknown. Patricia left her guidance counselor position after repeatedly breaking down during sessions with students Helen's age. Their house became a shrine of preserved hope. Helen's bedroom unchanged, her nursing textbooks still stacked on the desk, her clinical rotation schedule still pinned to the bulletin board. People tell us to move on. Patricia confided to the grief support group that met monthly at St. Lawrence. They say we need closure. But how do you close a door when you don't know what's behind it? Detective Rodriguez's retirement party in December 2011 felt like a funeral for Helen's case. He handed Detective Sarah Williams a cardboard box containing 15 binders of evidence, witness statements, and dead-end leads. "She's in there somewhere," he told Williams, tapping the box. "The answer's in there. I just couldn't find it." Williams inherited a case that had consumed her predecessor, but also a department with shrinking budgets and mounting pressure to focus resources on solvable crimes. New DNA testing technologies promised breakthrough capabilities, but each test cost thousands of dollars the county couldn't spare. Father O'Sullivan's stature in the community had grown beyond St. Lawrence. He served on the city council, chaired the Chamber of Commerce, and consulted on family crisis interventions throughout Harris County. Local television stations featured him during holiday segments about community service. The mayor proclaimed October 15th as Father O'Sullivan Day in recognition of his decades of selfless dedication. His influence extended to the Helen Donald investigation. When Williams suggested reallocating resources to newer cases, O'Sullivan personally called the sheriff to advocate for continued attention to the Donald family's needs. "Some wounds never heal," he told Sheriff Martinez. "But that doesn't mean we stop caring for them." The church renovation began in spring 2012. St. Lawrence needed updated electrical systems and modern office spaces to accommodate its growing congregation. Contractors discovered a storage room behind Father O'Sullivan's old office, sealed off during previous renovations decades earlier. Inside the forgotten space, workers found boxes of personal items, old photographs, and a collection of women's jewelry that nobody could identify. Sometimes the most dangerous predators are the ones we never suspect. What do you think those items represent? The jewelry box contained 17 pieces. A silver bracelet with a heart charm, pearl earrings, a class ring from Rice University, a gold necklace with the initials MR. Detective Williams photographed each item, wondering why a priest would keep a collection of women's jewelry hidden in a sealed storage room. The answer emerged through whispered conversations and reluctant testimonies that had been buried for decades. Angela Martinez was 23 in 1995 when she sought Father O'Sullivan's counsel during her parents' bitter divorce. What began as spiritual guidance gradually shifted into something darker. O'Sullivan scheduled their meetings for evening hours when the church was empty. He encouraged her to share intimate details about her relationships, her fears, her vulnerabilities. "He made me feel special," Angela told Detective Williams 17 years later, her voice barely audible. "He said God had given me to him as a gift, that our connection was blessed." The relationship lasted 8 months. O'Sullivan convinced Angela that their physical encounters were part of her spiritual healing, that questioning his methods showed lack of faith. When Angela finally confided in her sister, O'Sullivan was quietly transferred to a different parish. No investigation. No consequences. The church hierarchy treated it as a misunderstanding that required discretion. Similar patterns emerged from other parishes where O'Sullivan had served. Sandra Chun, a young teacher struggling with depression. Maria Rodriguez, a college student grieving her father's death. Lisa Thompson, a nurse recovering from a difficult divorce. Always young women in crisis. Always private counseling sessions. Always his word against theirs when they finally found courage to speak. The church had received complaints as early as 1987, But Father O'Sullivan's charm and community standing consistently outweighed the allegations. Victims were encouraged to pray for forgiveness, to consider their role in misunderstanding spiritual guidance, to protect the church's reputation by remaining silent. Helen Donald discovered the pattern by accident. Jennifer Walsh, a nursing student 1 year behind Helen, had sought Father O'Sullivan's counsel after her grandmother's death in August 2001. Jennifer attended the same grief support group where Helen volunteered, and something about Jennifer's behavior after her sessions with the priest troubled Helen. Jennifer became withdrawn, anxious during clinical rotations, reluctant to discuss her counseling sessions despite previously being open about her grief. When Helen gently pressed, Jennifer finally revealed the inappropriate nature of her meetings with Father O'Sullivan. Helen was furious, Jennifer later told investigators. She said no one should use God to manipulate people when they're hurting. She wanted to report him to the church and the police. Helen had spent weeks gathering evidence. She researched church complaint procedures, contacted other parishes where O'Sullivan had served, and compiled a list of potential victims. Her nursing school notebooks, discovered years later in her bedroom, contained detailed notes about predatory behavior patterns and victim advocacy resources. Father O'Sullivan knew about Helen's investigation. Jennifer had mentioned Helen's questions during one of their sessions, not realizing she was providing intelligence to her abuser. O'Sullivan's demeanor changed immediately. He began asking about Helen's family, her schedule, her relationships. He volunteered to speak with Helen personally about Jennifer's confusion regarding their counseling sessions. The meeting never happened. Helen disappeared 3 days before she planned to contact church authorities. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. During the church renovation, contractors discovered an old security camera system that had been abandoned when newer equipment was installed in 1999. The original recording devices were still stored in the basement, their tapes forgotten for over a decade. Detective Williams found a box labeled Security Recordings 2001 among the stored equipment. Most tapes had deteriorated beyond repair, but September 15, 2001 remained intact. How many victims stayed silent because they trusted a man of God? Do you think institutions protect predators when their reputation is at stake? Share your thoughts below. Sugarland thought they were safe. Your community might be next. Subscribe to learn the warning signs everyone missed. The Golden State Killer's arrest in 2018 changed everything. Detective Sarah Williams watched the press conference from her office, transfixed by the revelation that genetic genealogy had identified a serial killer who had evaded capture for decades. Joseph James D'Angelo's DNA, preserved from crime scenes in the 1970s, had been matched through public genealogy databases that didn't even exist when his crimes were committed. The technology offered new hope for cold cases like Helen Donald's. "We need to get on this," Williams told Sheriff Martinez during their weekly review meeting. "The DNA sample from Helen's car is perfect for genetic genealogy testing. We just need the budget." Fort Bend County had never allocated funds for advanced genetic testing. The $5,000 cost for comprehensive genealogical analysis seemed astronomical to a department already stretched thin. But the Helen Donald case had haunted the community for over 2 decades, and public pressure remained constant. The Donald family's savings had been depleted years earlier, but community fundraising campaigns generated enough money by late 2022. Local businesses contributed, church congregations donated, and even elementary school children held bake sales to support the effort. Fort Bend County partnered with Parabon Nanolabs in December 2022. Dr. Amanda Peterson, a forensic genealogist with 15 years of experience, received the DNA sample that had been preserved since 2001. The quality surprised her. Despite being over 20 years old, the genetic material remained intact enough for comprehensive analysis. "This is actually an ideal sample for genealogical reconstruction," Dr. Peterson explained to Detective Williams during their initial consultation. "We have enough genetic markers to build a detailed family tree going back several generations." The process began with uploading the unknown DNA profile to public genealogy databases. GEDmatch, Family Tree DNA, and other platforms contain millions of genetic profiles from people researching their ancestry. When someone's DNA matched portions of the crime scene sample, It indicated shared family connections. Dr. Peterson worked methodically, identifying distant relatives and constructing family trees that stretched back to the 1800s. Each match provided another piece of the genetic puzzle, narrowing the possibilities for who might have left DNA in Helen's car. Retired Detective Rodriguez followed every development from his home in Katy. Williams called him weekly with updates, honoring his decades of dedication to Helen's case. Rodriguez had filled a spare bedroom with copies of case files, witness statements, and evidence photographs. His wife joked that Helen Donald was his most faithful companion in retirement. "This technology is what we needed 20 years ago," Rodriguez told Williams during one of their calls. "Helen's killer thinks he's safe because enough time has passed. He's about to learn that DNA doesn't forget." The genetic genealogy work took 8 months of careful analysis. Dr. Peterson constructed family trees for over 30 potential suspects, eliminating possibilities as she narrowed the genetic connections. Some branches led to individuals who had died before 2001. Others pointed to people who lived far from Texas during Helen's disappearance. But one family tree kept appearing in her analysis. The breakthrough came in August 2023. Dr. Peterson identified a genetic cluster that pointed to a family with deep roots in Southeast Texas. The surname appeared in church records, military service documents, and local newspaper archives dating back generations. She called Detective Williams at 6:47 p.m. on a Friday evening. "I need to meet with you Monday morning," Dr. Peterson said, her voice carefully controlled. "I've identified our suspect's family line, and the implications are significant." Williams pressed for details, but Dr. Peterson remained professional. "I want to walk through the evidence in person. But Sarah, this is going to impact your community in ways you're not prepared for." Over the weekend, Williams reviewed the Helen Donald case files again, wondering which name would emerge from Dr. Peterson's genetic analysis. The DNA had been sitting in evidence for 22 years, waiting for science to catch up with justice. Monday morning's meeting would reveal that the killer had been hiding in the most trusted position imaginable. Patricia and Robert Donald never gave up hope for 23 years. They fought when others said to move on. They pursued justice when the case went cold. If their strength in the face of unimaginable loss inspires you, subscribe to see how families survive the unthinkable. Dr. Peterson spread the genetic charts across Detective Williams' desk like a roadmap to justice. 22 years of questions were about to receive answers that would shatter a community's faith. "The DNA belongs to someone from the O'Sullivan family line," Dr. Peterson announced, her finger tracing the genealogical connections. "The genetic markers are consistent with Irish ancestry, specifically matching descendants of Patrick O'Sullivan, who immigrated to Texas in 1892. Williams stared at the family tree, her mind racing through the implications. The O'Sullivan name had appeared in Helen's case file dozens of times, but always as a helper, never as a suspect. "Father Michael O'Sullivan," Williams whispered. "He's been part of this investigation since day one." The genetic evidence was compelling but not definitive. Other O'Sullivan family members could theoretically match the DNA profile. Williams needed more than genealogy to build a case that would stand up in court. Surveillance began immediately. Detective James Morrison and Officer Lisa Chun took shifts monitoring Father O'Sullivan's modest apartment in Rosenberg. The retired priest maintained a predictable routine: morning walks, grocery shopping on Tuesdays, weekly visits to his doctor, and regular attendance at St. Lawrence despite no longer serving there officially. Williams revisited every aspect of Helen's case with fresh eyes. O'Sullivan's involvement wasn't just extensive, it was perfectly positioned. He had arrived at the crime scene before being officially contacted. He had organized search efforts that could have steered volunteers away from critical areas. He had maintained close contact with the family, monitoring their emotional state and the investigation's progress. The pattern became undeniable when Williams created a timeline. Every major development in Helen's case had been followed by O'Sullivan's increased presence with the Donald family. When private investigator Jennifer Morrison was hired, O'Sullivan began visiting twice weekly. When the DNA evidence was first discovered, he organized additional prayer vigils that kept the community focused on hope rather than suspicion. He's been controlling the narrative for 23 years, Williams told Sheriff Martinez during their strategy meeting. Every time we got close to something, he redirected attention or comforted the family into trusting the process. The legal team worked carefully to build an airtight case. District Attorney Rebecca Torres knew the arrest would create a media sensation and community upheaval. They needed overwhelming evidence before moving forward. The security footage from September 15, 2001, provided another crucial piece. Enhanced digital analysis revealed a figure matching O'Sullivan's height and build speaking with Helen near her car. The timestamp confirmed he had lied about his whereabouts that evening. He had told police he was at the church rectory, but the footage placed him at the Walmart parking lot. Additional evidence emerged from the jewelry collection found during church renovations. Several pieces were identified by former parishioners as belonging to women who had accused O'Sullivan of inappropriate behavior over the years. The items represented trophies, keepsakes from his victims that he had hidden in plain sight. By February 2024, the case file against Father O'Sullivan contained genetic evidence, timeline inconsistencies, victim testimonies, and physical evidence linking him to multiple crimes spanning decades. The arrest warrant was signed on March 10th. That same evening, O'Sullivan's behavior changed. Surveillance teams noticed him making phone calls from public locations, avoiding his usual routines, and purchasing items that suggested travel preparations. Detective Morrison observed him at a Bank of America branch, closing accounts and withdrawing cash. He knows, Morrison reported to Williams. Subject is exhibiting flight risk behaviors. We need to move now. O'Sullivan spent that night pacing his apartment, visible through windows as he moved between rooms carrying suitcases. Phone records showed calls to airports in Houston, Dallas, and Austin. He was planning to run. 23 years of hiding behind clerical collars and community trust were about to end. The hunter becomes the hunted, but will justice finally prevail? Do you think O'Sullivan will try to flee? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Dawn broke gray and humid across Rosenberg on March 12, 2024. Detective Williams positioned her team at 5:47 a.m., knowing O'Sullivan's morning routine by heart. The retired priest typically left for his daily walk at 6:15, providing the perfect opportunity for a controlled arrest away from his apartment complex. O'Sullivan never emerged. Surveillance cameras showed movement inside the apartment throughout the night. Lights had remained on past 3 a.m., and neighbors reported hearing furniture being moved. By 6:30 a.m., Williams made the decision to approach the door. Michael O'Sullivan, this is the Fort Bend County Sheriff's Office. We have a warrant for your arrest. Silence. Officer Chen moved to the rear exit while Morrison covered the windows. Williams knocked again, her voice carrying across the parking lot where early commuters were beginning their workday. The door opened slowly. Father O'Sullivan stood in the doorway wearing the same black shirt and white collar that had comforted families for decades. His silver hair was disheveled, his eyes red-rimmed from sleeplessness, but his expression remained calm. "I've been expecting you," he said quietly. Williams read the charges as handcuffs clicked into place. "Michael Patrick O'Sullivan, you're under arrest for the murder of Helen Donald. You have the right to remain silent." O'Sullivan's neighbors gathered on balconies and behind windows, watching in stunned silence as the man they had known for years was led to a police cruiser. Mrs. Rodriguez from apartment 3B crossed herself repeatedly, whispering prayers in Spanish. "There must be some mistake," she told the gathering crowd. "Father O'Sullivan helps everyone. He brought me soup when I was sick." The news broke on social media before Williams reached the station. Breaking, beloved Sugar Land priest arrested in 23-year-old cold case murder. The story exploded across Facebook, Twitter, and local news outlets. Within hours, camera crews lined the streets outside St. Lawrence Catholic Church in the Fort Bend County Jail. The community's reaction split between disbelief and horror. Parishioners who had confessed their deepest secrets to O'Sullivan questioned everything they had believed about faith and trust. Parents who had allowed their children to participate in church activities under his supervision felt sick with worry. The man who had been Sugar Land's moral compass for over 2 decades was now accused of the community's most heinous crime. At the Donald family home, Patricia answered her phone with trembling hands when Detective Williams called. "We've arrested Father O'Sullivan for Helen's murder," Williams said gently. "I wanted you to hear it from me before the news reports." The silence stretched for nearly 30 seconds. "Father O'Sullivan?" Patricia's voice cracked. "That's impossible. He's been our rock. He's the one who never gave up hope." Robert Donald took the phone from his wife's shaking hands. 23 years of grief crystallized into a single moment of terrible clarity. The man who had comforted them, prayed with them, and promised them answers had been Helen's killer all along. "He sat in our living room," Robert whispered. "He held Patricia when she cried. He knew what he had done to our daughter, and he looked us in the eyes and pretended to care." The emotional toll was devastating. Relief that Helen's case was finally solved warred with the betrayal of discovering their trusted spiritual advisor was a predator. Every memory of O'Sullivan's comfort now felt like a violation. Every prayer he had offered a mockery of their pain. Media trucks descended on Sugarland like locusts. National news outlets picked up the story, fascinated by the narrative of a trusted priest accused of murder. CNN, Fox News, and NBC sent correspondents to broadcast from St. Lawrence's parking lot. The quiet suburb that had tried to heal from Helen's disappearance found itself thrust into an unwanted spotlight. O'Sullivan's first court appearance was scheduled for March 15th. District Attorney Rebecca Torres promised the community that justice would be swift and transparent, but she also warned that the case would reveal disturbing details about decades of hidden crimes. The night before the hearing, prosecutors received a call from O'Sullivan's attorney that changed everything. "My client wants to make a statement," defense lawyer David Martinez told Torres. "But not about Helen Donald. He says there are other victims you don't know about. Many others." Everyone in Sugarland thought they knew Father O'Sullivan. He was their moral leader for decades. What secrets is your community hiding? What trusted figures might not be who they seem? Subscribe if you want to stay alert to the predators among us. The Fort Bend County Courthouse had never seen crowds like this. By 7 a.m. on opening day, over 200 people waited behind police barriers, hoping for one of the 36 public gallery seats. National news crews established a media village in the parking lot, their satellite trucks creating a technological forest against the Texas sky. District Attorney Rebecca Torres opened with devastating simplicity. 23 years ago, Helen Donald trusted the wrong person. Torres told the jury of 8 women and 4 men. She trusted a man who wore the collar of God but carried the heart of a predator. The evidence will show that Father Michael O'Sullivan murdered Helen Donald to protect himself from exposure as a serial abuser. Defense attorney David Martinez countered with accusations of prosecutorial desperation and religious bias. "The state wants you to believe that a beloved priest, a man who devoted his life to service, suddenly became a killer," Martinez argued. "They have DNA evidence that could have been contaminated over 23 years. They have testimony from disturbed individuals seeking attention and money. They have no witnesses, no murder weapon, and no body." The prosecution's case methodically destroyed O'Sullivan's decades of deception. Dr. Amanda Peterson explained genetic genealogy to the jury using visual aids that traced DNA connections across generations. The evidence was overwhelming. The probability that someone other than O'Sullivan had left DNA in Helen's car was less than 1 in 847 billion. "This DNA profile belongs to the defendant," Dr. Peterson testified. "Scientific analysis eliminates any reasonable doubt." Victim after victim took the stand to describe O'Sullivan's pattern of manipulation and abuse. Angela Martinez, now 51, wept as she recounted how O'Sullivan had convinced her that their physical relationship was blessed by God. Sandra Chun described private counseling sessions that became increasingly inappropriate. Maria Rodriguez testified about jewelry O'Sullivan had taken as keepsakes from their encounters. The defense's strategy crumbled under the weight of consistent testimonies spanning 3 decades. Patricia Donald's testimony brought the packed courtroom to silence. Wearing the same dress she had worn to Helen's memorial service, she spoke directly to O'Sullivan, who refused to meet her eyes. "You held me when I cried," Patricia said, her voice steady despite tears streaming down her face. "You told me God had a plan for Helen. You knew where she was the entire time. You knew what you had done to my baby, and you let us suffer for 23 years." Robert Donald followed his wife to the witness stand, his hands shaking as he described decades of false hope and manipulated grief. He wasn't just Helen's killer, Robert testified. He killed our family too. Every day we trusted him was another day he stole from us. The defense called character witnesses who praised O'Sullivan's community service, but their testimonies felt hollow against the mountain of evidence. Former parishioners spoke about his charitable work, but prosecutors countered each positive reference with documented complaints that had been ignored by church hierarchy. On day 6 of testimony, the unexpected happened. Under cross-examination, O'Sullivan's composure finally cracked. Prosecutor Torres pressed him about inconsistencies in his alibi, his presence at every major development in Helen's case, and his collection of victims' jewelry. "You were there that night, weren't you?" Torres demanded. "You spoke to Helen in that parking lot." O'Sullivan's attorney objected, but the damage was done. O'Sullivan stood up in the witness box, his face flushed with anger and desperation. "She was going to destroy everything," he shouted, his voice echoing through the stunned courtroom. "Helen was going to ruin my life over lies and misunderstandings. I never meant for it to happen, but she wouldn't listen to reason." The courtroom erupted. Judge Martinez banged his gavel repeatedly as O'Sullivan's attorney attempted damage control. The confession had been captured by every camera, recorded by every journalist, witnessed by hundreds of people. The jury deliberated for 11 hours while Sugarland held its breath. Can a community ever truly heal from this level of betrayal? How do you think the jury will decide? The jury foreman's voice carried across the silent courtroom. "Guilty of murder in the first degree." Patricia Donald collapsed into her husband's arms as 23 years of anguish finally found resolution. O'Sullivan sat motionless at the defense table, his clerical collar removed for the final time, replaced by an orange jumpsuit that would become his permanent uniform. Judge Martinez sentenced him to life without the possibility of parole. "You exploited the sacred trust placed in you as a spiritual leader," Judge Martinez said, addressing O'Sullivan directly. "You murdered an innocent young woman to conceal your pattern of abuse, then manipulated her grieving family for decades. This court finds your actions not just criminal, but profoundly evil." The Catholic Diocese of Galveston-Houston faced immediate fallout. 7 civil lawsuits were filed within the first week, representing victims who had been ignored or silenced for decades. The church agreed to establish a $50 million victim compensation fund and implemented new safeguarding protocols that many critics deemed insufficient. St. Lawrence Catholic Church struggled to rebuild its congregation. Attendance dropped by 60% as parishioners grappled with the realization that they had worshipped under the guidance of a predator. The building where O'Sullivan had delivered sermons and heard confessions felt contaminated by his presence. But Helen's memory began to heal what O'Sullivan's crimes had broken. The Helen Donald Memorial Scholarship, funded by community donations and matching grants from Methodist Hospital, provided full tuition support for nursing students who demonstrated Helen's commitment to serving others. The first recipient, Maria Santos, was a single mother from East Houston who wanted to specialize in trauma care. "Helen never got to save the lives she dreamed about," Patricia Donald said at the scholarship ceremony. "But through these students, she'll save lives for generations to come." Detective Rodriguez finally found the piece that had eluded him for 23 years. At 67, he volunteered with victim advocacy groups, using his experience to help other families navigate the criminal justice system. Detective Williams received promotion to lead the newly expanded cold case unit, armed with genetic genealogy resources and renewed community support. Helen Donald's case had proven that time doesn't erase justice, it only delays it. The investigation room where Helen's file had lived for over 2 decades was converted into a victim services center. A small plaque by the door read, "In memory of Helen Donald and all those whose voices were silenced." On quiet Tuesday evenings, Patricia Donald still thought about what Helen might have accomplished. How many patients she would have comforted, how many lives she would have saved, how different the world might have been. Helen wanted to be a trauma nurse. She died before saving a single life as a professional. But the scholarship in her name will create hundreds of nurses who'll save thousands of lives. If you believe in turning tragedy into purpose, subscribe to see how victims' legacies live on.